Hello and welcome back to NoBS. Today we return to talking about a terrible thing that's happening to a certain group of people in a very, very troubled state in the United States. I'm of course talking about Jewish people who have had some troubles and run-ins with officials in the state of New York, which of course features New York City, which also happens to have one of the largest Jewish populations, not only in America, but in the entire world. There's a lot of those people there, including the Orthodox Jews who follow a more strict traditional form of their religion. And yeah, they've grown and prospered there for many generations. They've done good work for their communities. They've raised great families. They're a wonderful addition to the American zeitgeist. But the problem is the mayor and governor of that state and city, respectively, or cross respectively, you know what I mean? Basically, Mayor de Blasio of New York City and Governor Cuomo of the whole state, they're getting anti-Jewish once again. This came up before a few weeks ago. Actually, it might be a few months now when de Blasio had some rulings that affected another group of Jewish people. It might involve some of the same ones as far as I know. And essentially, de Blasio was closing their park and doing this kind of like anti-Jewish stuff, just showing his bias. And it's happening again now with the governor. Governor Andrew Cuomo is popping up here, and he's threatening to close some of the Jewish churches. Their churches or temples, or what they call synagogues, are being closed by Governor Cuomo in another move that shows the Democrats are pretty anti-Jewish at this point. They're not big fans of the Israelites. They're not very much interested in appeasing them or caring about them anymore, which is strange because they claim to support minority groups and act like they're open and welcoming of everyone. But the truth is they actually support the religion that hates Jewish people far more than they support the Jewish people, who are much more in tune with America, our values, and our traditional kind of Christian influenced society, which is, stemming off of Judaism. Judaism is a precursor to Christianity. Our Savior was Jewish, Jesus Christ. And that's where this kind of connection comes from in our country and our people. And the Democrats are against that. And we're going to talk more about why. We're going to get into the story and why it's wrong soon. But first, let's go to a New York Times story. So this is happening in New York. This is a story from the Times there. We know they're very biased and left wing and probably trying to support Cuomo. But let's give them a chance. Let's see what they have to say and see how bad this thing gets. Essentially, it starts off, backlash grows in Orthodox Jewish areas over virus crackdown by Cuomo. Rules that would have pronounced impact on synagogues were met with protests and fires in a part of Brooklyn, seeing an uptick in cases. Now, this is a strange kind of angle because they normally would help and support these protests. They've been supporting demonstrations by BLM and these violent Antifa people all summer for like 3 or 4 months now. And now that there's someone protesting against them, it's supposed to look worse, supposed to look bad, supposed to seem like they're evil people when really they're just trying to defend their community, and they're sick of the Democrats kind of like pushing them off to the side, casting them away, and ignoring this group of people, even possibly being anti-Semitic themselves, which is interesting since they do call this out for the conservatives. They pretend we're like those 1940s Germans who hurt a lot of Jewish people back in World War II, but that's not the case. The actual people that are anti-Jewish in the current year are the Democrats. Orthodox Jewish and other religious leaders lashed out at Governor Andrew Cuomo on Wednesday over new restrictions on schools, businesses, and houses of worship as protests broke out in New York overnight, leading to scenes of chaos and the injury of at least one person. That's not a good sign. We don't want anyone to get hurt. But again, this is hypocritical reporting. These are the same people that support those violent BLM protests, which have done far more damage. They've hurt far more people. Dozens have died. And I'm not saying that justifies this one person getting hurt, but it's like one injury is not that big a deal considering BLM has killed like 50 people. And the next thing to point out is the restrictions on schools, businesses, and churches. It's just getting ridiculous for one. I mean, first of all, we got to note that New York has had the worst coronavirus response of all time. Like, I try not to blame the leaders too much because they try to blame Trump for the 200,000 that died in the country. But you got to remember, most of those came from New York, and it was because of Andrew Cuomo and the mayor de Blasio just ruling very poorly, sending sick people into nursing homes, not taking care of things properly, not locking down, telling people to go out to eat in the middle of a pandemic. Bad things happened there, and that's their leadership's fault because they did actual things that made it worse. As for Trump, they don't point out anything he specifically did worse. In fact, we have lots of evidence showing he did good things to stop the spread in the beginning, like when he halted travel from the origin country where this terrible virus came from. He also started testing and getting a task force going and stuff like that actually happened. But now back to what's going on in New York. New York has had trouble. They're obviously failing their response, and they're trying to lock more stuff down, but they're very specific with what they lock down. They like they want to lock down schools and churches for some reason. They include businesses in here, but essential businesses are still open. Like, that's the thing that's super hypocritical, is like they let restaurants and bars open. Like you could go to the doctor and get rid of your unborn baby, but you can't go to church on Sunday. Like, that's the kind of weird, messed up stuff that's going on in New York. We are appalled by Governor Cuomo's words and actions today. 4 Orthodox Jewish lawmakers representing the areas affected by the shutdown said in a letter posted online late Tuesday, he has chosen to pursue a scientifically and constitutionally questionable shutdown of our communities. Their frustration was reflected on the street, where videos shared widely on social media showed hundreds of Hasidic men, most of them without masks, gathering after midnight and setting fires along 13th Avenue. In the Borough Park neighborhood, the crowd soon turned violent, with a mob angrily swarming at least one Hasidic man they believed to be disloyal to the community. Okay, so this is again a time to think about the BLM protests and think about how they would have covered that. Like, it's super funny that they mentioned without mask. Like, that's a big deal to them now. But it wasn't during BLM. It wasn't during Antifa. Like, they didn't care. Like, if this article was about a BLM demonstration, it would be super complimentary. It wouldn't mention the mask. It would talk about inequality and how they're trying to save the races and, protect minorities and stop supremacy and just total nonsense like that. It would have been totally a fluff piece. But in this case, the Times and the liberals that run it and the liberals that run these cities in New York as well, they hate Jews. They don't like this. They don't like these people. They're trying to frame them up as being like violent and like, haphazard, spreading the virus on purpose. And really, they're just demonstrating and showing the town that they're not going to be pushed out and turned into second-class citizens. Sound familiar? Because it seems like a lot of the same kind of stuff that happened during World War II. Snitch, one man can be heard yelling in English in one video as the crowd beats the man. He was identified as Barish Getz by a relative who spoke on the condition of anonymity out of fear for their safety and was treated overnight at Maimonides Medical Center in Brooklyn. The police department did not immediately respond to a request for comment. The new restrictions announced by Mr. Cuomo on Tuesday are intended to combat worrisome outbreaks in Brooklyn, Queens, and New York City, northern suburbs, including several areas with large Orthodox populations. Mr. Cuomo seemed to be specifically targeting Orthodox synagogues that have become scenes of large gatherings of worshipers clustered together, with many not wearing face coverings. The governor has used photos of packed crowds of Orthodox Jews this week to make the case for imposing restrictions to certain areas. So he is specifically coming after them. He is targeting their freedom of speech and their freedom of expression and freedom of religion. I mean, admittedly, there is some question, some worry to have here if they are gathering too much and, risking themselves and spreading this. That's not a good thing, but it's also a free country. If people want to risk themselves and go out and do things, if they want to ride a motorcycle, they can, even though that's more dangerous than a car. There's different things like that. And yeah, essentially it's targeting them for expressing themselves, and, they're just not the preferred religion of choice for the Democratic Party. You don't see this happening to other religions. I mean, Christianity probably could get it too. They don't like Christians, but let's think of other religions, like ones from the Middle East, ones that worship and bow and kneel and do all that stuff. Like, they're not getting targeted here. And it's just a really questionable thing. You're like, why are you supporting this group that hates us and also, silencing this Jewish group who loves America, who want to be a part of this country and they support us? It's just a really weird thing. But the anger was not limited to the Orthodox Jewish community. The Roman Catholic Diocese of Brooklyn, which has 1.5 million followers and 210 churches in Brooklyn and Queens, said it was taken by surprise by the governor's announcement. Bishop Nicholas DiMarzio of Brooklyn condemned the new rules as outrageous in a statement on Tuesday night. We fervently object to being told to further reduce capacity because we have strictly adhered to the protocols and the safety measures have been working, he said. The safety of parishioners is paramount for the Diocese of Brooklyn, but the religious freedom of our parishioners is being unjustly attacked. So this is a response from the Catholics too. As I said, the Christians are under fire as well. Jewish Christians are not the religions of choice of the Democrats. We know they support this other religion that starts with an I. That's a very, very, very dangerous. They hate America. They've attacked us before. This bad group that the Democrats love right now. Their leaders are members of that. They don't support Jewish people. That's the enemy of that group. And now we're seeing them go after Christians too, which is just, that's the religion and foundation of the original people from our country. This was a Christian nation, albeit there's a separation of church and state, but you still can't ignore that culture and that part of our history and society. In a letter posted online on Tuesday, 4 Orthodox Jewish lawmakers lawmakers, State Assemblyman Simcha Eichenstein and State Senator Simcha Felder, and City Council members Coleman Yeager and Chaim Deutsch, very cool names by the way, accused Mr. Cuomo of lying to community members about the scope of his lockdown plan during a conference call earlier on Tuesday. They denounced it as a duplicitous bait and switch. The lawmakers also criticized the governor for irresponsible and pejorative rhetoric, including the use of a photograph from more than 10 years ago during a news conference earlier this week that showed a Hasidic crowd gathering for a funeral. So this is another bad look. This is specific lawmakers of this group, this Orthodox Jewish group, and they're pointing out the hypocrisy and the lies of Cuomo, who is offering one thing in person and then switching behind their backs. And in addition, the governor used these old photos. I remember seeing this on the news too, and he was trying to point out how these groups are gathering too much for funerals. But if that was true, you could use actual current photos from your area, but instead you're using 10-year-old ones from a decade ago. It doesn't make any sense. It looks like you're lying. It looks like you're trying to make something up and target this community for other more nefarious reasons. Not surprising considering the track record of Democrats who go after groups they don't like. They're constantly, infighting and taking out people that have wrong think. They've done this before in the past too, when they wore white hoods and oppressed minorities and tried to get them to stop voting after the end of the Civil War. That about wraps things up. Hope you guys enjoyed today's video. Make sure you comment your thoughts on everything below. Hit that like button if you enjoyed what you saw. Subscribe if you're new, and hit the bell for notifications too. Until next time, have a great day.